As it goes on, you'll see it differs in some significant details from what I'm wearing, which is from about 1415, 1420. So, Tom is standing here in what he's going to be wearing under his armor. You can see he has his hosen on his legs, which is pretty much what he would wear normally. He also has soft leather shoes, and you can see they have laces on them, and that's what distinguishes them from ordinary shoes. He's wearing a shirt. You can see the white at his cuffs, and his arming doublet, which has been quilted. It is lightly padded, and while this does provide a little bit of extra armor protection, its biggest function is to make the armor more comfortable to wear. Lacing too? Okay. The other function that his doublet is doing, which is a little bit different from the rig that I'm wearing, is that he will be lacing his leg harness to that doublet, so it will help support the weight of the armor on his legs. The garment needs to be tight at the waist in order to put the weight on his hips instead of pulling it down on his shoulders. So the traditional way for a knight to arm is to start at the bottom and work his way up. So it looks like we're having a bootlace malfunction. We're frequently asked how long it takes to put someone in armor. You're about to see that, of course. But the answer is it depends. It depends on how familiar your helpers are with your armor, how cooperative the armor is going to be that day. Sometimes one has a little too much food the night before, and the snugger parts don't want to close up very well. So, Sabatons.
It shrank in the wash.
We're going to start with the Sabatons, which are his foot armor. Jenny, would you demonstrate the flexibility of the Sabaton? So you can see it bends up quite a bit, which means you can walk and run in it. And it bends down mostly so that you can relax your foot in your saddle on the stirrups, because the medieval knight seat is a little different from modern English and Western riders. So these Sabatons fit over his shoes, and there's a little latch at the heel called a turning pin. It fits through a slot, and then the pin is turned so that it is at 90 degrees to the slot and holds it closed. And then the laces go through holes at the tip of the Sabaton and are tied above it. This keeps the Sabaton from flipping up when you walk. Mine are actually using a slightly different system. I don't know if you can see the strap under my toes there. So that goes over the toes of my shoes. I also have a turning pin closing my heel. And the other thing that's, I think, different, Tom's Sabatons, each of the lames, the individual pieces that make it up, is riveted to the one next to it. So that's a very solid construction method. Mine, only the first two lames are done that way. The rest of the lames are riveted to leather strips, which actually provides a little more lateral flexibility that is sometimes necessary to move your foot in combat. The next piece will be the greaves, which cover his lower legs. And so far we're looking pretty much alike in what we're putting on. The greaves are actually the hardest piece for an armorer to make well. The metal is usually fairly thin, and it is highly shaped. You can see how it follows the shape of the leg very closely. It covers the calf, then has to flare out over the the ankle joint. If it doesn't flare out right, you won't be able to move your foot on top of your sabotons. You won't be able to fight. And the back of the armor, where it comes back over your calf, is part of distributing the weight on your body, so that the weight of the greaved should be resting on your lower leg. I think we weighed Tom's whole armor at one point, and altogether it weighs about 85 pounds, I think, which is pretty close to what I'm wearing. Mine's a little bit heavier because I'm a little bit bigger than Tom, and that means more surface area. And I've got something he doesn't have. We'll get to that. So once the sabotons are on and the greaves are on, we will move on to the upper leg armor. We'll get there when we put the greave on, Tom. So the upper leg armor consists of a thigh piece, usually called a cuisse, and it has knee protection called a polane. The polane has a small extension on the outside. You can see that on mine as well. And then in Tom's case, he has a lame on either side of the polane. That's part of the articulation of the knee. And below that, a small extension, modernly often called a demi-greave. Its strap goes through a staple on the back of his greave, which again helps it stay in place. There's a strap that goes around at the knee, again to keep it in place, and then two straps on the cuisse. The upper part of the cuisse has a leather. The colorful laces you see there will go through holes on that leather to tie the leg armor to the doublet. I'm actually wearing a somewhat different system in that I'm wearing a fabric item called a ledinier, and it's essentially a waist belt that performs the function of the lower half of Tom's doublet. To some degree, this is speculative. We're basing this on manuscript evidence and documentary evidence about the garment. But when you see knights in manuscript pictures who are partly out of their armor in the 14th century, you don't see laces coming through their doublet. So while you do see this in the 15th century, it's hard to know what was used by all knights. The answer is, of course, that not all knights used exactly the same stuff. So Tom has two places where it ties to help distribute the load on the fabric. I do as well. One of the things that's different about my leg harness is a little hard to see from your position out there in the audience, is the lane here actually underlaps my cuisse as well as the polane. This is just an alternative way of making that joint work. The little bit of leather that you can see on the cuisse there provides just a little bit of extra protection on the inside of the upper leg, which can be the difference between life and death if a blade gets in there, because there's a very important artery running through there. But it also keeps it flexible enough that it fits well against a saddle, and you can still feel your horse enough to control it properly. How are we doing, guys? There's a lace loose on Tom's right saboton. All right, you'll notice Tom's posture is improving as he gets into the harness. one of the things armor does for you is it helps on your posture, and you'll be very unhappy at the end of the day. Now the next piece Tom is going to put on once he finally gets all his laces together will be his male shirt. All right, while we're waiting for the lacing, Jenny, anybody who'd like to feel the weight of the male shirt is welcome to heft the bag.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
It's kind of.
All right, feels heavy there? Put it on your shoulder. Let it rest on your shoulder. Oh, Jenny, you're going to have to balance it for him. All right, get it upright. All right, not as bad. I mean, this is not what it feels like to actually wear it. Yeah, you're just trying to do it with one arm. But when you put it on as a shirt, it is easier to bear. So we're going to be here all day. So even after the talks, we'll have the armor up in the pavilion back there. We have some other armor up there from some alternative kinds, and also some other pieces. We have some Common Soldier armor up there as well. So I actually have a different arrangement with the mail that I'm wearing. You can see my skirt peeking out from underneath my cuirass. And you can also see that I have mail in my elbows and my armpits. It's not connected all in one shirt like Tom's. Can you hold the shirt up before you put it on? Show the crowd the shirt. There we go. So you can see that will cover his hips and his torso and the upper parts of his arms. On with it. What I'm wearing is I've actually got a partial skirt on underneath, which has a leather upper, which is buckled on me to reduce a little bit of the weight that I'm wearing. And I have a sort of a half shirt that I'm wearing. It only comes down long enough to fill my armpit holes. Wiggle, Tom, wiggle. All right. This is the male settling bounce. It helps the ring slide into place and settle the weight in the right place. And Tom just likes to bounce some days. So you can see them fussing with the arms. This is in preparation of putting the plate on top. And now Tom is having his doublet tugged to resettle the cloth bit underneath so that it doesn't abrade him later. Okay. What would you like next, Tom? Okay. This is Tom's body armor. And from the inventories that we look at, we can tell that this is a pair of plates, a set of plates. The metal bits are all riveted to the leather on top of it. This one is patterned after a statue in Prague of St. George. It's one of the few pieces of art that we have to show the back of these. There are not any full survivals of any of these from our periods. So he has got rings over the front of his hips, much like I have. And you can see he has got a full breastplate. The brass rivets making the curves are decorative. They also help hold the leather to the steel underneath it. He has much smaller plates on his back. Tom, did you have too much of the feast last night? Committing to a wasp waisted armor like these are requires also a commitment to watching your weight. So the smaller plates on the back are very flexible, which is both good and bad, but they're much easier to make. One of the things that happened in the late 14th century was a change in the availability of iron billets because of the rise of new forms of blast furnace. And that also came about at the same time as they were making breakthroughs in metallurgy, allowing a more consistent steel and also the hardening of steel. So as more and more plates are available, you can make bigger pieces of armor. So the very first piece that's made with a big piece of armor is the breastplate. But they're not common enough for Tom to have one of those on his back. So he has smaller plates. You can see that I have a full-size piece on my back. But even so, it is not, the part that comes around down here is separate. So there are two wings riveted to my back plate to make it fully enclose my torso. So you see all the buckles, and it's quite clear Tom cannot get into that himself. But that's okay, he's a knight. He can get away with things like that. So, the other difference you can see between the two of us is I have this plate here. This is a Ponce plate. One of the things this lets me do is I've got a little extra flexibility in my torso that Tom doesn't have within the armor, that I can move it before I have to start moving my hips. The next piece Tom will put on is his arms. These are done in the English style, with the shoulder armor permanently attached to the rest of the arm. Period terminology on armor is a little more flexible than we 21st century people tend to like. So you can find the arm harness called arm harness. You can also find it called a rear brace or a dam brace. Modernly, armor scholars call the lower part of the arm the dam brace. Our lovely Jenny here will point it out to you. The dam brace, which covers the lower arm. The rear brace to cover the upper arm. Right. And the elbow is a cup, if you speak English, which most of us do. It's essentially exactly the same piece of armor that the knee is, except it's for your elbow. And up at the top is a spauldron that caps onto the shoulder, and it is attached by lames to the rear brace. It's on leathers, which make it very flexible. But leather, of course, is subject to rot on campaign. It can also possibly be cut. So anything that's attached with leathers is more vulnerable to coming apart on campaign. I have a fairly similar arrangement, although you can't see the top, because that's one of the big differences that you'll see between our armors, probably the one most people spot first. I am wearing pauldrons for my shoulders, and these were introduced in the very early 15th century. And most of the suit I'm wearing is patterned after a survival in Coburg Castle, but that piece has none of its pauldrons. So we had to go to an artistic source for the time period, and there's a statue of Orlando in Dubrovnik, which we used as a resource. And I worked with my armorer to make sure it covered me the way Orlando was covered. So I actually practice fighting in harness. So it's important to me for the research to know what it's capable of doing and how it affects the art of arms. But this Orlando fellow has no shoulders. He's very narrow in the shoulders, and I'm not. So this looks much broader than it does on the statue because I am much broader in the shoulders. Because armor should work with the body it's on. If it doesn't, you won't be able to move correctly or be able to fight. You'll also notice a minor asymmetrical, unlike Tom's. This is essentially a horseman's harness. So the side that a lance will come from on horseback will be from my left side. So the bigger one is on my left side. It protects me better. You might also see that there is a stop rig on that, and that also helps catch a point. The other side has a cutaway so that I can put a lance under my own arm. And I have brackets here for holding a lance rest, but that can be removed for when I'm on foot. So you can see if Tom turns to put his left side toward you, not quite all the way, right? You're in good fighting position, right? Who can see mail in the armpit? See any of mine? You can see some on Tom, right? Those are targets. Right? The downside is these are made for fighting on horseback. So they're not really made for doing this a lot. Now, that's not really made for it either, but it's easier. I mean, I've got the flexibility, but it's more tiring to lift this extra metal. So the surviving fighting manual that I study actually shows guys on foot, sometimes fighting with both of their pauldrons, sometimes with one, and sometimes with none, just relying on the mail for their shoulders. So, what would you like next, sir? Gauntlets or helmet? Okay. So Tom's now putting on what's normally called nowadays an hourglass gauntlet for the shape of it. It was a very common style gauntlet in the latter part of the 14th century and into the 15th century. And you can see it's decorated. You have a motto on there, Tom? No, a very simple one. My own hourglass gauntlets have a motto as well. Mater Dei Memento Mei. Or who better to protect you in battle than the Mother of Mercy? So the gauntlets have, put your fingers up, so they can see it, right? You can see the brass knuckles. Those are gadlings. They also serve to protect the joints in his fingers. He has fairly long plates on his fingers, and I have scales. This is merely a choice. Both styles exist in gauntlets throughout the 100 Years' War. You can see the cuff shapes are a little bit different. Right? Mine extend a little bit further back, and I also have a slight hinge. Gives me a little bit more flexibility. And my back plate extends further over my fingers for a little bit more impact protection.
Mine has fingernails.
My hourglass gauntlets have fingernails too. There's a question out there. Well, if I were to punch you with them, you'd know. But when he puts his helmet on, there's really not much I can punch that this will do anything to. It's mostly for protection. Now, the Black Prince's gauntlets, which survive in Canterbury Cathedral, have little leopards on every knuckle. And boy, you wouldn't want to get punched with that if you weren't wearing armor. It would just tear you right up. The last piece Tom will put on is his helmet. This is a bassinet style helmet. You can see that it covers his skull and comes down onto his neck. And he is wearing an Aventail with that, which is male. Is your Aventail padded, Tom? Yes, it is. Okay. So the Aventail allows him to protect his neck while still having a good bit of mobility to turn his head. He's got the visor, which he's currently wearing up, which is something you want to do to be able to take a breath or to see what's going on. And then it comes down for when you're fighting. And there's a number of features going on here. You can see the pointy snout. Right? A lot of times we get kids asking us if you can peck someone with it. but no, not really. What it is it provides two functions. One pretty obvious, it is a glancing surface. So that a point, what would be a point coming in, will hit and move away. If it happens to go up toward his eyes, where a blade like that could enter, it will hit this boxed out area and be channeled away from the slot. Similar thing on the breathing slots down here. Right? You really don't want a point coming in there. So you can see he has holes on this side and no holes on this side. What did I say before about what side a lance comes from? This is the same issue. Every hole you put in that visor makes it weaker. Every hole also provides a place for a lance point to catch. And a lance is probably the most dangerous held-in-the-hand weapon that a knight can face, because there's an awful lot of mass moving that point into you. I don't know, about 200 pounds of guy wearing, close to 100 pounds of armor on top of a 1,000-pound animal, probably moving at about 30 miles an hour. That's a serious impact. The fighting manual that I study actually says that you should, target a visor with your points, but you may not go through it. So what it advises is when you discover your point doesn't go through, lift it up and stick them again. My helmet is a bit different, and since I'm doing the microphone, we'll have it held up for you there. It's a style called an armet, and this is a relatively new helmet style for the time period. It has a little pin at the chin, which opens so that the cheek pieces fold up. Yes, there's a hook in the mail there. This is part of armor not being cooperative. Live and on stage. So it opens up, makes it very easy to get in and out, into and out of. It also allows the plate to close tightly on the neck, right? So it's much tighter to the neck, and you can see at my throat the breastplate turns up. When I wear that helmet and I close it on my neck, there's no way for a point to get in at the front of my throat, which is more protective than this is. Now, a lot of men will wear a male Bizan, also known later as a standard, underneath, which is a collar of mail, as well as an aventail, so there'll be two layers. Also, force coming in is still slowed down when it hits this, but there's an awful lot of sensitive stuff in there. And when the manual I study says you hit someone with a weapon when you're throwing a middle cut in Mezzana, the preferred target is right there, essentially right under the edge of the helmet. So, Tom is fully armored. I'm wearing everything but my helmet at this point. You can see the belt that Ian is wearing there. That and things like Tom's fancy gauntlets are advertisements. They're the sort of thing that you wear to say, "Don't kill me, I'm worth a ransom." It doesn't always work. Woo! I'm not done. So, I have no idea where the time has gone, but we'd be happy to entertain some questions.